Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brendan Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com, joined by Beavers Edge senior writer Ryan Harlan. We're coming to you guys following Oregon State's 10-7 win over the Washington State Cougars at Reser Stadium this last weekend. It was an awesome night at Reser. Hope everyone is still enjoying the fun that was, and obviously hope you checked out our post-game breakdown video with Ryan Harlan, Brogan, and myself, as it's been good vibes in Corvallis recently. Rob Akey, obviously interim head coach, has taken the Beavers to two straight wins with Lafayette and Washington State. We'll be breaking down the win over Washington State and then getting you guys ready for Sam Houston. Before we get further deep, I want to let everybody know I am sort of kind of losing my voice, so we're kind of going through it here, but I'll be on, I'll be here, and we got a lot to talk about, but just wanted to mention that to everybody in case they're like, why does Brendan sound so darn raspy? But we're fighting it a little bit here, but it's that time of year, folks. November, the time change, the dark rolls, yet here we are. Ryan, good to see you, my friend. We obviously just wrapped up Rob Akey's press conference, offense on Tuesday, defense on Wednesdays. We're recording this podcast. How are the vibes with the team right now as they're kind of getting ready for senior week?
I mean, that's kind of what it is. It's just turn the page, take it week by week, and honor about 16 to 17 seniors in total participating in senior day on Saturday. It's just go out there and get those guys a win, and kind of turn around a season that's been very disappointment and kind of ended a little bit, at least on a high note to a degree. I mean, you have two games left, obviously, when to finish things out, but. At least, for one last home game in research to have things end on a positive note.
Yeah, no, and we talk about the opportunity. Obviously, Ryan mentioned it before we jumped on, folks. If you were ever looking for a cupcake of a senior day, like, again, we're going to kind of get into it. Obviously, when we wrote about it earlier this week, the spread was 18.5 in favor of Oregon State. Some more money has come on the Beavers money line, Ryan. They are now 20.5 point favorites. I wouldn't be shocked if that number continues to climb. I mean, Sam Houston has been horrible. And we were talking about it in the press box, Reeser. I mean, let's just take a quick look at their schedule and just even see what their closest loss was this year, Ryan. You go back to a 2 point loss to Jacksonville State. Other than that, Sam Houston pretty much been handled in pretty much every other game they played this year. That includes Hawaii, Ryan's boys, New Mexico State, Louisiana Tech. I mean, that kind of shows like they might be packing it in at this point, Ryan.
Yeah, but also too, I think, at least from talking to the coaches and talking to Akey as well, they're also like, yeah, record doesn't mean anything either.
True.
Those guys are going to be coming in to get their first win of the year, and they're also comparing Sam Houston to their struggles because they're pretty much, a couple plays away from their record being vastly different for the Bearcats versus, Oregon State. So it's like there's some similarities that the coaching staff has drawn upon a little bit here, and maybe that is you know what I mean? Maybe that is the
Right.
case. It's always getting that first win. I think for any program that's kind of in a losing streak,
Right.
like or what Oregon State found itself in, and what Sam Houston currently finds itself in, just getting that first one makes a heck of a difference, and kind of just momentum and morale across the entire team.
Right.
So. I think, this is the one game where, yeah, you can definitely, I would say favor Oregon State very much so, but at the same time, though, it's kind of like, well, record aside, like Wazoo probably had some of that of like, hey, this Oregon State team is 1-7. We should be able to handle them pretty well, and look what happened there.
Right.
So not overlooking your opponent and playing a complete game through four quarters, I think this group is still, locked in on that, with the task at hand for this weekend.
For sure. And we'll get into Sam Houston a little bit later in the podcast. But again, to Ryan's point, they're 0-8 this year. And I look back 2 weeks ago, they got blown out 35-17 to UTEP. UTEP, as we know, is not a very strong football program. Also have a 55-0 loss to Texas on their mark this year. So a very winnable game for Oregon State. And we kind of knew that for the last several weeks coming into it. But recapping kind of the win over Washington State, Ryan, I mean, how big, and we kind of talked about it at length, but just my initial takeaways now in the kind of days after. what Oregon State was able to do defensively, I think with the pressure, we've now learned kind of post haste that Washington State was missing a few offensive linemen in that game, which kind of maybe allowed Oregon State to get some of that pressure on Eckhouse they were able to get. But I thought the six tackles for loss, the six pressures, the amount of times they hit the quarterback or hurried him or made him impactful, I thought that was huge. Jaheim Patterson was big, and then a moment that got kind of glossed over late, Ryan, is I remember looking at you when they tackled Eckhouse out of bounds on what would be Washington State's penultimate play of the game. And I looked at you and I said, that just made that field goal a lot harder because they have to kick it from the right hash. And it was no
Yeah.
longer a straight on field goal. And anybody will tell you a straight on field goal is a million times easier from them one of the hashes. And then you talk about how perfect Washington State's kicker had been, Ryan. Like it was almost like the football gods kind of destined it for Oregon State after the season they had had. And, you kind of showed me some images of how frustrated Jimmy Rogers was in that game. That was obviously, not the game Washington State expected to play. And, you go back and look at their 2-point loss to Virginia, their close loss to Ole Miss. And I kept thinking to myself, did that Washington State team not show up, or did Oregon State play good football, like really good football? Maybe their best football of the year, and I think it's somewhere in the middle, Ryan. I think Oregon
Yeah,
State did.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they did play defensively some of their best ball of the year. Washington State still has dudes, and offensively, yeah, we kind of talked about it. It was a struggle. The passing game was a real struggle. Even when Malik Murphy came in, he was still only 2 of 3. So we'll see the status. It sounds like from Rob Akey's press conference, and then when we had Rob Akey on Rip City Radio on Monday, Ryan, he expects Jabari to be back available to play on Saturday. So we could be back to this kind of, one quarterback, two quarterback game again. But nevertheless, it's nice to know that Jabari avoided that season or a serious injury, I should say. And overall, I think Beaver fans got to be proud because, Ryan, if you would tell me after Wake Forest that Oregon State would be able to put together an effort like that and take down a Washington State team that went toe to toe with two ranked teams, I think that's a credit to Rob Akey, and I think it's a credit to these players that never packed it in this season. Maybe a couple guys are already starting to look for their next destination, but the majority of this team still intact. I think that's absolutely huge, and Beaver Nation will stand behind that.
Oh yeah, I mean, you give credit where credit's due to Aki on that, but like even talking to Coach Marshall today, they didn't change anything defensively of what they were doing. I mean, it's been exactly what they've been doing when Bray was at the helm and now Aki in terms of defensive kind of approach to the game. And I think you saw a lot of that just finally pay off where guys trusted what they were doing and played loose out there on the
Why do you
field.
why do you think that? And we've had this asked on the board before. So was it now that we've seen a Trent Bray problem of some sort?
I don't know
Just to reflect,
if
I don't know either, but
yeah,
it's a good
like
question I feel to ask. Like,
because
yeah,
guys because like after that Wazoo win, you saw Jaheim and Jemai East, shout out Bray. So guys still, think very highly of him. I just think part of it was you front loaded the schedule a lot and like the
right,
quality of opponent that you were playing, clearly the stuff that you were doing in practice and behind the scenes and
100%.
on and even on game day didn't really translate out until you got to this latter part of the schedule where things are a little more palatable.
Right,
I think that's part of it. Like because if they're not changing really a whole lot defensively, or reinventing the wheel even on offense too, like that means what they had still worked. They have dudes on that roster. It's just I think the quality of opponent that you were playing and you were, a couple plays away from adding a few more wins onto your belt for this year. Like if you didn't give away points to Fresno, if you didn't dig yourself in a hole against App State, if you were
right.
able to hold on against Houston, this is a very
Very
different.
different story right now.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
different.
Like I think you would find yourself probably in a similar boat that Wazoo does right
Right,
now, where you're at least in the hunt for a bowl
right,
opportunity. It may not necessarily be like, top tier bowl, but
right,
like you
right.
at least have a few more wins than what you currently do right now. And I also think too, just from a, maybe just from a personality standpoint and kind of leadership standpoint, Bray's leadership is very different from
It
Aki.
is.
Aki's very more rah-rah, very more vocal. And I think you see guys really respond to that
Maybe the team
a
needed
bit.
that. Yeah, maybe the team needed that.
Just like that's something to me where I kind of think, you know, you kind of see that pay off a little bit. And so when Coach Marshall said that, that was, kind of eye-catching a little bit because, obviously mid-season you're not going to reinvent the wheel a whole lot. There are very rare cases where that happens on either side of the ball. But I think it's just they finally have put it together for the first time all year,
Right.
where at least on that side, where the pass rush is finally at a point where you thought it was going to be at preseason, just happened to be later on in the year. And then
Yeah.
offensively, I'm like, yeah, definitely needs
Still a
to
struggle.
improve. I think you can't necessarily like blame receivers, tight ends, quarterback play. Like I think they all share it equally in terms of just kind of like not being on the same page because the running game was good.
Right.
That was perfect. That was fine. Hankerson carried the offense in that game. I think just the passing attack wise, like you need to work on those little things. That's what Aki was saying. It
Right.
starts with the offensive line, starts with the quarterback, starts with the receivers and tight ends. It's a whole collective effort to get that part working. And
Yeah.
like and that's the thing. It's sure you're kind of back to where you were in 2024 a little bit with not really a true reliable wide receiver number two. Taz Reddick maybe has that kind
Sure.
of role a little bit more so after the Wazoo game, but you kind of have to scheme ways to get guys open. Like
Right.
that's part of it. And whoever's back there, whether that be Jabari or Malik, you can't miss those easy throws, those layup throws too. Like
Right.
those are things to help get you into a rhythm and keep the defense honest because every
Right.
single defense knows what Oregon State wants to do. And if you can at least get the passing attack to be serviceable, I think you find yourself in a good spot to close out the year on a high note because 60 passing yards is not gonna cut it.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, like you
I
need to
just,
score more than 10 points. I mean, I know that
yeah,
this weekend,
sure.
definitely.
Yeah.
But like it's one of those where like you need to see some sort of improvement, I think, in the final three games to say like
Right.
to really kind of grade out this offense.
Yeah. I mean, I think regardless, I mean, I still think Oregon State made the decision they felt they needed to do. If Trent Bray was still coaching, do I think the Beavers would have beat Lafayette? Yes. Do I think they would have beat Washington State? I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair question. That being said, I look at it, Ryan. I think the offense and the special teams are going to define this season, and when it comes right down to it. And I think you look at it as a change at special teams needed to be made after Fresno State. It wasn't, and I think that set the standard that not high standard is acceptable, regardless. And I think that just kind of
Yeah.
shows
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
across the roster, right? Then you talk about the inconsistency on offense. Early in the year, Ryan, passing game more than solid. I remember writing the line. Going into the Oregon game, Oregon State boasted a top 30 passing attack. They did. But the running game was hardly anywhere to be found outside of that Fresno State game. Then now it's kind of flipped on its head where it's passing games really struggling now. Offensive line running games coming together a little bit, but now the passing game doesn't look like it's quite there. And we've seen Ryan the last two games high in passing yards against Lafayette, Jabari Johnson 79. High in passing yards against Washington State, Jabari Johnson with 33.
And you can't,
That's
and those are the stats. Like you can't,
right.
like spin that any other way.
I
Like,
mean, I don't want to put, and I'm not putting that all
yeah.
on Jabari
No,
Johnson,
no, 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 no. Definitely
but
not either.
but
But
there's
like
some
the
issues
stats are
with
stats.
yeah,
Yeah.
but there's
Yeah.
issues with the Beavers passing game, and I think there have been issues
Hmm.
once teams have realized, hey, we're gonna double up Trent Walker and force somebody else to beat us. I think it's kind of taken away that quick first read. As Ryan mentioned too, the tight ends have kind of been hit and miss at some point. So I
Yeah.
would just say inconsistencies on offense have kind of plagued this team this year, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
just kind of how it is. And you look at it, your defense saved the day, but
Mhm.
most times Oregon State's not Iowa, Ryan. They're not going to win too many games 10-7.
No. Yeah.
So I think you take it obviously, but you have to build and look for an offensive explosion this weekend
Yeah.
against Sam Houston. And we'll kind of transition into that momentarily. But Ryan, I want to go ahead and give you a moment to talk about a piece you dropped on Beaver's Edge this morning, kind of putting a beautiful bow tie that I'm not wearing right now on the
Trying
blueprints.
to put
Let's see.
a bow tie on
Let's
it.
go ahead and just tighten it up real nice. There we go. Kind of. Oh, there we go. We're working on it. But yeah, Ryan. So give
Yeah.
me a little bit about your bow tie on the Blueprint Sports situation.
Well, obviously, we when the news broke, we did talk about Brent Blaylock's exit from Oregon State athletics. So, kind of offering my kind of closing thoughts on that a little bit, and just kind of when my conversation happened to fall with him, as well as the full terms of the contract I was able to get from the agreement from the original Sportico article. So, talking about some things that we didn't quite discuss yet. So, some kind of concessions that were made in this deal that Oregon State gave Blueprint that on paper definitely looks a little more kind of raises some scrutiny a little bit, but I would say it's more of just the optics of having a third party vendor that's controlling your NIL have a lot of oversight into things that they probably should not have access into. And then the last kind of thing is just like the biggest question I've been asked and all this is like, where do we go from here, right? Like, what happens to Damnation? Does another collective enter the space? What happens with Blueprint and Oregon State's deal going forward? Because at this time, they've not officially bought out the deal yet, as far as I'm aware of, right now. But been kind of poking around to see if I can, get some information on that. And yeah, just trying to, be a little speculative on the future of NIL at Oregon State after kind of sifting through the rubble
Yeah.
from all this. Like, it's not by any means a perfect bow tie, but with everything that's kind of happened this season, from the start of football to now, something's gonna happen probably next Monday that we're gonna have to write about for the next kind of news story that breaks here in Corvallis.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and not to mention, again, if you guys want to check out that or any of Ryan's three previous installments, he did a great job and has them all linked for you there. You can go check it out at beaversedge.com. If you're not a subscriber, you can sign up for just $1 to read Ryan's story and much else. $1 for your first week. Again, you can check that out at beaversedge.com. It's our coaching special we got going right now. And ultimately, Ryan, that kind of brings us into the final kind of big meaty segment of the show, which obviously is getting us ready for Sam Houston, but also talking coaches. So before we get into Ryan and I's kind of special segment of the day, which is going to be Ryan's top three choices, my top three choices, maybe even a couple honorable mentions in there. And again, this is mostly from what we've heard and also just our personal opinion. This is not, Scott Barnes' short list, so to speak, but sharing our opinions on that. But overall, Ryan, you kind of talked about it. We talked about it a little bit briefly in the podcast earlier. Guarding against an 0-8 team in Sam Houston, what are the challenges, the biggest challenges that you see with that? Because as I look at it, it's a team that has to travel or not even the furthest they've traveled this year because they did have to go all the way to Hawaii in week 3, but a team that's playing kind of out of its comfort zone on the West Coast. It's 7 o'clock, so it's really almost like 9 o'clock, I think is going to be Texas time roughly. So that's going to kind of create a unique kind of situation. And I think it's not quite Lafayette, where I think Oregon State can win on talent alone. And I was pretty steadfast and like, hey, run your best guy right at their best guy, Anthony Hankerson, at their linebacker. And I'm like, he's probably going to need two or three guys to bring him down. And Oregon State finally figured that out in the second half. Sam Houston has dudes, but at this point where they're 0-8 and you're kind of looking at their schedule, they got at Oregon State, Delaware at home, at Middle Tennessee, and Florida International. Ryan, there's not a great opportunity for them to get a win on their schedule. So that's what I was kind of talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Phil Longo's just in his first season as head coach. I just wonder how much fight is still left in them, especially coming off a 55-14 smacking at the hands of Louisiana Tech.
Yeah, but also too, right? Like, and the other way I kind of look at this as well, despite the record, is you're kind of playing with house money, right? At this point
Sure.
in the year, where it's like, what do you got to lose, right? You're going to try to pull out everything that you can to try and get a win. But from the way that I also understand it too, um, their offense can, present a little bit of challenges kind of here and there if you're not ready for it. But defensively though too, they present a lot of different looks, different fronts, disguising a lot of coverages as well. So that can present kind of issues for, a quarterback who for any quarterback that might not be ready for that kind of front, especially on the defensive side
Right.
in terms of getting that pass rush. But like I think though, like generally speaking, it's a team that's playing with house money with nothing to lose at this point,
Yeah.
and they're gonna, kind of give you their best shot through 4 quarters. That's kind of really how at least I approach it, even while looking at their schedule too. It's just like you're gonna try to do everything that you can to get a win that you need a win bad. And
Yeah.
if guys aren't, we don't know on the same Houston side of things, if guys aren't checked out, right? If they're still fighting, if they're still, competing, then like sure, that's probably a little more, uh, a more fair thing to say
Yeah.
in this case, but like you're also 0 and 8. Your schedule's not that favorable from, this time around making that transition from FCS to FBS. It's, very much growing
Yeah.
pains for this group in their first kind of transition into the FBS level of
Right. And
competition.
again, just looking at the numbers, Ryan, they are dead last in the Conference USA, almost allowing 500 yards of offense per game. I only know that because we looked it up for our prediction part of our 3-2-1 from breaking down. That's obviously a total get right number. They allowed 266 through the air, 214 on the ground, and 41 points per game allowed. So I don't think Oregon State's going to have much struggle to score in this one, Ryan. I think, and then on the other side of the ball, you look at Hunter Watson, their quarterback, thrown for 1,100 yards this year, 5 touchdowns against 4 picks, not particularly impressive, but he's also got 74 carries for nearly 300 yards and 2 scores. So this comes
Yeah.
back down to if you contain the dual threat quarterback, I think, kind of like the Beavers did against Eckhouse this last week, and
Yeah.
Eckhouse had similar numbers, I think you'll find yourself in pretty good shape. And obviously, going into this matchup, we'll have our staff predictions. We'll have the edge report from Dylan Callahan Crowley and the injury report from our side as well, all at BeaversEdge.com to come this week. But that's pretty much the rundown on Sam Houston. Again, the 0-8 Bearcats come in to face the 2-7 Oregon State Beavers. Another night game, 7 o'clock for Dad's weekend, and Ryan Harland and I will be carrying the water up in the Reeser press box as our other staff member Bergen Slaughter will be enjoying the game via Dad's weekend. Ryan, so obviously wishing him fun this weekend as well, but last part of the podcast. We got 10 minutes left. We're going to break down our top three, top five choices of sorts. Top three, and I said top five, is we'll throw in a couple honorable mentions. Ryan, I'll go ahead and kick things off just to kind of get the ball rolling. So, just to preface, we've ran through a couple different hot boards at Oregon or at BeaversEdge.com. We're up to V 4.0 now. We'll have another update coming up this afternoon with some more just kind of scuttlebutt news that's come up. But overall, Ryan and I thought it'd be fun if we just kind of shared who we think Ryan and Mai's top three are, and then throw in maybe a couple honorable mentions. So, in the sake of just being fun, I'm not going to rank one, two, three. I'm just going to go my three that I like and then throw in my honorable mentions. So, as far as honorable mentions for me, I got to throw Jay Harbaugh in there. He's made our coaching hot board special teams coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks. And Seahawks have been a revelation this year. I love the coaching tree. I think he might be a little bit more of a stretch. So I throw him in as honorable mention. But I really like if you could hire somebody who spent time with Mike Riley, John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, and now Mike McDonald. I'm taking that 10 times out of 10. Other honorable mention, I want to throw in Ed Ogeron just because, again, I will say honorable mention because I don't think he's going to ultimately be one of the final candidates. It's just my opinion. I think there are some The concerns that have been raised on the damn board about how his tenures ended at Ole Miss and LSU, I think, are fair from my perspective, and I kind of agree largely. I think he'd need to have a key plan for how he wants to win at Oregon State, how he wants to survive NIL, but he would be kind of another honorable mention. Then we arrive at my top three. And again, this is going to change. Ryan and I are going to do something like this as it goes on, but as we're looking at this on Wednesday, November 5th, in no particular order. I really like Brennan Marion. The more that I keep going back to Brennan Marion, and I know he's young in his coaching career, just in year one at Sac State. Ryan, the appealness of having, or the appeal of having somebody who has a mantra. We have the video linked in our coaching hot board. He wears a cowboy hat. He has a, he's just a presence, a very enigmatic presence. Somebody who I think could really sell Oregon State, sell his vision, sell his, what he's building. That being said, I think if you gave him resources, which Oregon State would dwarf Sac State's resources, I think he'd be able to recruit. And I like the go-go offense. Oregon State would have an offensive identity that they could recruit to for as long as he's here. They would have an offensive identity where you go to kids in high schools and whatever, you say, this is how we're going to play. This is how I see you fitting in it. You can go, this is how I did it with, Matthew Sluka, UNLV, and so many others. Like, the go-go offense has been tried and true and proven now, and that would be appealing to me. He's young in his coaching career, so I can understand some hesitancy there as well. Last two names, former head coaches. First, Brian Harsin. The more that I've thought about this process, I really like what Brian Harsin brings to the table. I like the fact that he is a established head coach and somebody who had a ton of success at Boise. Sure, it was only 6 years, right? But he goes 69-19 at Boise. Before that, he was 7-5 in his lone year at Arkansas State, rebuilding that program. He had the two down years with Auburn, but again, do you think he's the first kind of Pacific Northwest coach to go down to the SEC and kind of get chewed up and spit out a little bit? So I think his appeal coming back to the West Coast, having won a place like Boise where they have so many of the same challenges you have at Oregon State, I think that'd be nice too. Last but not least, as I got just a few seconds left, want to go with Paul Chryst. And I look at Paul Chryst because of his connection, Ryan, to Oregon State from his two different coaching stints before, his still relatively young age, 59, and the fact that Mike Riley is on the hiring committee. These are two guys that have been around each other for a very long time, going back, I believe, to the San Antonio Riders days. And, Paul Chryst was another guy who I can remember talking on radio a few years back, Ryan, and being like, Wisconsin fired Paul Chryst when he was 67 and 26. Like, it blew my mind. So, he also rose up the Pitt program before going to Wisconsin. There'd be some concern about him in the future, kind of the nil space, but overall, I think that's my top three. With 5 minutes left, I hand it back to Ryan Harlan.
I mean, within the honorable mentions, if we're gonna do two, I would say I would go Eric Morris, and then
Like
the
it.
guy that's currently up at East Lansing right now, who still currently has a job. I keep bringing this up to remind you all of the fact that there is a high chance that this could happen.
Yep,
I
we've heard it.
understand people's
We've heard it.
reservations on it. I get it. Trust me, like I get it 100%, but don't put it past Barnes. That's all I'm gonna say on that. Don't put it past him. And then as for kind of my top three, um, in no particular order, I would say Brent Vegan, Jason Eck, and then I would also,
I do like Vegan for what it's worth. For anyone that wants to come at me and
yeah,
say, Brandon, you didn't include him, I do like him. He would have been my next up honorable mention.
I think if Jim Mora were to move
Mm,
on from UConn, if
I
he
do like
feels like
that.
he wants to kind of take that next step into a different job, that's at least you're being more so in a conference than you are with UConn. Uh, but in terms of situationally, like I'd say, I would not turn him down
No,
on an offer like that.
it's intriguing. It
Um,
is.
so that's at least something there where those are kind of my top three. I really more lean towards Eck and what he's been able to do
Mm.
at New Mexico. A little biased, yes, but like realistically though, like from kind of the excitement that's gone around New Mexico since his arrival, there's a lot more eyeballs on New
Hmm.
Mexico football than what there has been. Family of mine that went there too have now gotten excited about watching the Lobos.
There
Like,
you
so
go.
it's very much like there's different energy around this program, and like I would do if I were Barnes, I'd do anything and everything to try and get a phone call with Eck and make him say no to me. Like that's
Right.
what I
I
would
mean,
try to do.
no, I think you're spot on, Ryan. And Jason Eck, there's, like I said, I think we have something like over 25 candidates on the Beaver's Edge hot board. So it's hard to whittle it down. And this is simply just our first kind of crack at it. But to Ryan's point, after Bronco Mendenhall took them, I believe, 5-7 last year and then
Yep.
bounced, Jason Eck's got them 6-3, folks. New Mexico's going to be bowling. Oregon State, not bowling. New Mexico bowling. That's, and to Ryan's point, he built up Idaho. The vibes are really, really good right now at New Mexico. And for the most part, you've got to like that. To Ryan's point, you call him, but you got to come up with that $4 million because I believe there
Yeah,
is that
that's the
$4 million
challenge.
buyout.
That's the
So,
challenge.
however, Ryan, they just came up with Trent Bray's buyout. So, buyout, I mean, we're talking monopoly money here, dog. Monopoly money.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
I
true.
mean, it's like you can find a way. You can always find a
Yeah.
way, man. Like especially when you're a a big university with endowments and all those kind of a things, like,
Hmm.
money can always be had. But
Yeah.
to that point, obviously stay locked in. To Ryan's point, we have not heard, the scuttle against the guy in East Lansing. That, to Ryan's point, that's not just our opinion. We've heard that could happen. So
Yeah.
again, there's a lots of different ebbs and flows that we've continued to see out of this process, folks. But most importantly, just make sure you stay locked into Ryan Harlan, Brendan Slaughter, Brogan Slaughter, Dylan Callahan, Crowley across all socials, and of course talking to us on the damn board as we're going to be continue to be plugged into this situation. But overall, Oregon State, their final home game of the weekend, Sam Houston, 7 o'clock at Reser Stadium on Saturday. Ryan Harlan and I will be there to provide all the content, close out the Reser Stadium slate in style. Ryan, I can't believe it's already been 7 home games this year come Saturday, but whew, this year has been a doozy. But no, I
Yeah.
still I love doing what I get to do with you, man, every week. And obviously, make sure you stay locked into BeaversEdge.com. We'll have our staff predictions, injury reports, the Edge report, much, much more here on Beaver's Edge, in addition to another edition of our coaching hot board. So make sure you stay locked in. Again, you can join Beaver's Edge for just $1 for your first week for new subscribers. Appreciate everyone tuning into this edition of the Edge Podcast.